Glad to have Connor on the show again. We're going to talk about Venezuela. I think everybody needs to buckle up. He's done some homework, and I'm going to have to catch up. So, Connor, glad to have you.
Happy to be back.
What you got, man?
Venezuela, it's kind of a hot button topic right now. A lot of stuff's happened, a lot of different opinions and views on it. I know, my side of things has been, in some cases, speaking before thinking a little bit.
Okay.
So I wanted to start with...
Give us an example really quick on your side of speaking before you think type of thing, and then how after stuff kind of flows through and you start getting to the facts. Give us an example of that on your side.
So the way I see it, if we stick to this example specifically, it's using verbiage that doesn't really portray the message that is trying to be gotten across. So You've seen some groups get spun up, these political activist groups that are really good throughout history of getting, anti-war, anti-imperialism, U.S. expansion protests spun up pretty quick in big cities. It's PSL and Answer, I think, are two of them, and they've been doing it for decades.
Right.
And a lot of times, shocker, people jump in without taking a second to think about the whole situation. Right. And in this one, like from the left, my personal viewpoint is, kind of getting into sort of the topics that we're going to be discussing, is that Maduro not being in power in Venezuela is potentially a very good thing for the Venezuelans. He was a bad dude. He was connected with drug cartels. He was pretty much repressing thoughts and opinions and voices in his own country. He was not sticking to a democratic process. So him not being there is a good thing.
Okay.
Big picture, fingers crossed. However, when the left, I think I've seen a couple posts of, people saying, holding signs that are free Maduro and whatnot. And I've not quite seen like how much vetting of the truthfulness of these signs and whatnot go through. I think a lot of it, where the left sometimes gets ahead of itself, is voicing the liberal opinion of, we don't agree with how Trump went about doing this operation, like the start to finish presentation of it, but that's being misconstrued as we're supporting keeping Maduro in power, and that's just not true. And the other part of it being, it's important in contexts like this to think about the Venezuelan people. It does not matter to me in Winchester, Virginia, who the president of Venezuela is. It does not affect my day-to-day. So to take my feelings out of the conversation as far as the positivity or negativity of him being there, it's all about the Venezuelans. Are they going to be in a better spot today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year than they were 4 days ago? And hopefully, I think there is potential for doing that now. And that's where it brings me to my research, my second.
So realistically, what we're saying is, based on what you've seen, there was an effort by some, where we'll just say left, it could be far left, but there is something out there where they're protesting him being removed. And I think we can agree him being removed is a positive thing for the Venezuelan people. It's just like Afghanistan is a positive. It's just how we do from here, realistically. If that country turns into a better country because of it for the Venezuelan people, then it's a positive thing.
Correct. And I think the one tweak I would put on that assessment would be, a lot of the protests, I think, because they were spun up as quick as they were, in my viewpoint, the protests are not about taking Maduro, so to say, not about how that affects Venezuela. It's about how we went about executing the mission, executing the objectives, and the lead up to it. You look at, going after drug boats, moving a carrier group into the area, moving all this stuff and equipment and whatnot, saying it's one thing, and then boom, we pull off this operation, and the legality of things is drawn into question. The context and the reasoning or the means through which this was executed, I think, is more so where the pushback against the administration is, not necessarily that Maduro was a good person, but that our approach to this did not meet the criteria it should have.
And is that from a standpoint of like the other side, so the right side? So from our standpoint, I look at it and think, okay, it was a well executed plan, and it removed a dictator, and we have precedent to that. I think we can discuss more about that. But like from my standpoint, I don't think anybody out there could say, when 70% of the people, and those are the numbers we discussed earlier, 70% of the people in Venezuela supported an opposition party candidate, and Maduro did everything he could to remove that person from being on the ballot. And then once the ballot came in, then there was issues there where he wasn't, like, realistically wasn't the best person. The other thing I think is interesting is the influence of China and also Russia in Venezuela. I mean, that's way too close. They talk about oil. And I think the first thing is, I think the words of like, oh my God, you're stealing the oil like we did in Iraq. I think the problem with that is there is something to be said about that. Not necessarily that we want to take the oil, but we don't want someone else who is against us to get in and have access to that. And I think clearly from what I've read up until this point, China and Iran, or China and Russia, both were receiving oil from Venezuela. And that's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that that's how a dictator was staying in power, with two countries that are, I think even the left would agree, Russia is not a friend. I mean, we had Russiagate and everything else, and obviously China is not the best partner. And I think they've done some things that would indicate, hey, there's a problem there. So from my standpoint, when I look at it and I think about Venezuela, I think, yeah, 100%, like there's a lot of ways that you can go about it. I will say this, it reminded me a lot more of someone that is near and dear to you, Barack Obama, making a decisive decision to say, just think about that. We went to a country that we were not at war with and killed someone who, and so what is
you're talking about Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden, we went and killed him. Obviously we had declared a war on terrorism. But so from my standpoint, we still did the same in the context of we went against someone else's sovereignty. We went against the sovereignty of Pakistan to accomplish an objective. So how is that different in Venezuela?
So great. We'll start spot on there. That's a great jumping off point on that. And so for me, my perspective, and this is purely just my thoughts.
Okay. When
you're comparing and contrasting the two, you're looking at, Osama bin Laden and going after Maduro. I think while yes, and feel free to say I'm splitting hairs, they are operations, they are approved by the president to go take care of something that we felt needed to be taken care of. But I think that there's a few very key differences between these two operations. I'll run through those real quick, or as quick as I can. Okay. The first and foremost is when we went after Osama bin Laden, it was as small as possible operational force to go into one home to get one man who was not the president of Pakistan, was not in any way important to Pakistan. And it's someone that we had been targeting for decades.
The Pakistan thing, do you not think he was experiencing safe haven in Pakistan, being right next to
he absolutely was.
He was valuable to Pakistan from that standpoint because he was a valued guest of Pakistan. I understand the leadership thing, but I think splitting hairs, Maduro, can you say someone that represents that I'm a democracy, but then runs people? I think that's the biggest complaint people have about Russia is Vladimir Putin just kind of rewrote the republic that they had, rewrote the history and said, I'm going to run as long as I want to run. And so from my standpoint, I agree, a duly elected president of a country is one thing, but someone who has clearly shown that he is not following the paths of what that country stood for. And you have 70% of the people saying, this is not what we want.
Sure. So. But so specifically, like with the Osama bin Laden thing, like why these two, in my opinion, are different real quick was he's not the president. He's just, for all intent and purpose, he's just a guy in a house. We sent in the smallest possible military unit to get him out, and the only casualties were his guard and whoever was in that home that posed a threat. Okay. No one else in Pakistan, nothing outside of that house, maybe that block, because I know a helicopter crashed, and that I forget what that damaged, but all, just that house was hit. And it was someone who, and we'll split hairs on this one, it was someone who did a direct attack on the United States, killing 3,000 Americans. When you compare that to Maduro, Maduro was the president of his country. It was a full-blown assault, helicopters, Navy, ground troops. 80 or so people died, including 30-something Cuban soldiers. So it wasn't just the guard.
So what were the Cubans doing there?
I don't know. I saw that apparently, because I guess it happened in Panama or Nicaragua too, that I guess Cuba is outsourcing its special forces to be like palace guard for Central American presidents. But yeah, because it's something like 32 of their, I think they're called like the Black Wasps or something, I saw, were his guard.
The dead hornets.
So we killed about 80 people. Multiple U.S. soldiers were injured in the attack. We bombed multiple locations, not just wherever Maduro was. And it was very, very public, as opposed to bin Laden, where it was covert, sneak in, sneak out, get him and go. So to me, they are two vastly different situations because of multiple context points. Again, simple, just off the top, you're taking out a president and a terrorist, which the president could be considered a terrorist with his connections with the drug industry or narcotics industry. So there are those, but those are indirect deaths, as opposed to bin Laden, who flew planes into 2 buildings and directly facilitated the death of 3,000 Americans. So that's, to me, that's why I see them as different styles of operation. And to me, that's also why I view the Venezuelan operation as needing congressional approval. And I know that we have the precedent throughout history of doing operations, including going into Iraq in the first place, within executive purview without needing congressional backing, because it's a operation, not a military war, declared war. But that also calls into question, because I remember when Bush went into Iraq, a lot of people questioned him for that. A lot of people said, hey, whoa, I don't know if this is legal then. I know when we went into Panama to take out Noriega, it did not have congressional approval when it happened. It got congressional approval after the fact. So we have these moments where we have acknowledged that something is not how it should be done, and we sort of back channel the approval. And in doing that, to me, looking at something like this, I take that as like, okay, I robbed a bank and got away with it, so I have permission to rob more banks because I got away with it the first time. Just because we did it doesn't mean it was legal then either.
Right, but I also think that what we deal with is precedent, and in the judicial system, that's what we go by. We have our legislative laws; they're interpreted by the courts, and they have precedent assigned in appeals courts and things like that. To go to a couple of your points, if we just go like, okay, Osama bin Laden, known terrorist, we'll go with the point. It was a different kind of military operation. I would remind you that Barack Obama had killed a ton of people, which I'm fine with, in drone attacks in Pakistan. Even killed an American, which again I'm fine with, because they tied him to terrorism. Here's something to think about. We lost how many people? We lost several thousand people in the September 11th attacks. Just in 2025 alone, Grok estimates between 76,000 and 87,000 people overdose deaths in the United States. Mm-hmm. And I don't apply it just in that case. I also apply it from a standpoint of China with COVID. There was a lot more deaths and there was no accountability for that. So it's not like I'm just saying one thing is, just in one area, this country is not responsible. We're going to talk about Venezuela. From my standpoint, there have been a tremendous amount of deaths that are contributed to the nucleus of China, Russia, and also from Venezuela, and it was almost acting as a hub. And so from my standpoint, hub for illegal activity, because again, these countries, they are all supporting a rogue, what I would consider a rogue regime. And the more leeway you give them, the more the probability of something bad happening in our backyard is greater. You have China trying to get influence down there. You have Russia trying to get influence. And from my standpoint, the fact that we've had all these overdose deaths, he has declared them a terrorist threat, international terrorist organization through Venezuela, which is why he was taking out the boats. So like from my standpoint, he has had that discussion. And if they had an issue with that discussion, they have that ability. They have the ability to go to the court, file suits and say, hey, we don't think this is right. I think from my standpoint, you can dislike the way that I think at my point, I think people hated Barack Obama and they complained about everything that he did. I felt like what he did with the SEALs and what he did to take down Osama bin Laden and kill him and take him out, I think that was a ballsy move, 100%. And the flip side, I wish, and I feel like history will show, and a lot of it depends on how we move from here in Venezuela. I think history will show that this was a ballsy. It's almost like going on fourth down. Big Georgia fan, we tried it twice. We made it once. The second time we didn't make it, but that's a ballsy move. It's saying I'm a leader, and people are not going to agree with leadership. And like from my standpoint, Barack Obama, phenomenal choice to use the SEALs in that way. I take not exception, because that's a strong word, but like what you're saying is a military operation. Those are military targets. I understand that we're not at war with them, but there is without question, there is collateral damage in any military operation, unfortunately. Just like when we do the drone attacks and there's, innocent people inside of the car. Innocent is a relative term. They might not be actively engaged in terrorism at that point, but they are affiliated with somebody that is. And so like from my standpoint, for me, as it relates to what you said, is I agree it was a military operation. I think you've made it sound a lot bigger than it is, because you had all these entities in support. And I think when you start adding up the entities in support of Osama bin Laden, to include the burial at sea and everything else, you're talking about a whole lot more people.
Sure.
And that's one of the things about it is you can't number people and say, well, we had a whole fleet out there doing this, and so they were involved in this operation. They were involved, but like how operationally, who was used and who was utilized to complete this operation? Not in
sure.
We're talking about a very limited number of bombers, a limited number of attack helicopters, and then the Delta operators that went in there and actually extracted them. And I think that to me, what I look at, let's call it a win from my standpoint, because it's not easy to go after somebody. First of all, everybody talks about the intelligence operations and how shitty we do a job. This is 100% the CIA should be taking victory laps, because they did an amazing job of getting information. And I think the average person looks at that and they're like, oh, they just landed at the right place. No, there was a lot of work that went into them going to the right place. Second thing is, from an operational standpoint, those dudes went in, and that was a surgical hit. I mean, the fact is they went in there, they didn't cause any damage to anything, to their target that they wanted to extract alive. They did it. It was almost like a hostage rescue, except it was a targeted, we're going to extract this person back to justice. And I think that speaks volumes to the efficiency of them and what they do, their level of training. So like I said, I think we can disagree that, hey, whether it's a military operation, not a military operation. I think one of the greatest things about our conversations is we both are going to come down on different sides. But I think at the end of the day, one of the things, just strictly as it revolves around this conversation, is that this was a good thing for the people in Venezuela. It remains to be seen if we do a good job. In the past, we've not done a great job of supporting things. And I guess this will go to your next point. I think it's really a good thing that we did not try to shove a leader down their throats. We took an existing leader that they had and are in negotiations. Those might go to shit any day now, but as of right now, we have a duly elected. Well, that remains. She's going to take it. It doesn't look like the United States is trying to take over a country. I feel like we're trying to help them take care of themselves, and we're going to start. We didn't just like dismiss everybody. Think about Iraq with Paul Bremer. I mean, we just like got rid of everybody in it, and we were stuck there for a long period of time. This, I think Trump is. I mean, people can go back and forth and they can say different things, and I think one of the things the Secretary of War is taking hits for is like he doesn't have any experience. But I can almost, and I want to give a shout out to the Raging Cane, the general that is over the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is a VMI graduate, which is very short distance away from where we live in Lexington, Virginia. And I think it's pretty cool that you have that kind of connection in Virginia, that we've got our military academy that's producing that level of leadership. So to your next point, we've got the transition to a new leader.
Yes. And so that's where I spend a little time. I mean, honestly, most of it's on just Wikipedia because it's all history anyway.
Okay.
But that's where I wanted to hit you with some stats and get your feedback on it, because we are now in the transitional part. We're in the next part of the phase of who takes over. There's the conversation coming from the president that, we are there. We will run the country until a safe and proper transition of power can come through. We're going to send potentially our oil companies there to rebuild their infrastructure. We, at least in the short term, based on what Lindsey Graham, President Trump, Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff, have said, we are going to be involved in the Venezuelan government for at least the short-term future, if not a little longer. But looking back throughout the history of the United States, we have an MO of sticking our nose in other countries. And historically, it's not gone great for us.
Okay.
Through my rough research, kind of looks like that. There are 3 instances that I came through where we successfully changed the regime of another country. Now, when I looked at this, my premise was, since 1950, post World War II, how many times has the U.S. Either directly or indirectly, through covert or non-covert means, affected change within a different country's government, a regime change? Rough numbers that I was getting back was somewhere between like 60 and 70 times we've had some sort of influence in that. And then the number drops down when it's like our direct involvement of taking someone out and putting someone in. And in doing that, I found 3 instances where it went well. So number 1, 1965, Dominican Republic. It took a few years, but by 1978, they have a democracy. They have since pretty much just maintained that democracy, have had economic growth. They're in a good spot. Grenada, 1983. They now have democratic elections. They've had economic growth. They're in a good spot. Panama, 1989, Noriega. We went in and got him out. And they've pretty much been, for all intent and purposes, a successful country ever since. The interesting thing with that one was Noriega was a CIA asset that we had worked to put into place in the first place. So we kind of went in and cleaned up our own mess.
Right.
Now, the flip side of, so that was 3 in the last 75 years or so. The flip side of that, and I won't get into details on all of them, but
let's just do 3 to 3. Do the 3 worst. I know
3 to 3.
Afghanistan.
So Iraq and Afghanistan would be the 2 that you would think of off the top of your head, but I'm actually going to jump to a couple different ones, 3 other ones. So I'll give you 4 actually, because one of them is kind of important. So Guatemala, 1954, resulted in civil war, and Guatemala became a failed state. 1964, Brazil, we installed what became a military dictator for about 20 years, who was notorious for torture. 1965, Indonesia, that was Sumarto, Sumarto, using CIA intelligence. He became a dictator, and his looked at as killing, or that government became dictatorial and looked at as killing anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million people, and ruled for about 31 years. And then the last one I'll give you is 1973, Chile. That's Pinochet, who became a dictator and was accused of killing or disappearing about 3,000 of his people.
Okay.
Along with that, you've got Saddam Hussein, CIA asset, Shah of Iran, that was a CIA coup, Mobutu Sese Seko, CIA coup in Africa. All of these are examples of people where we have backed them, or we have specifically put them in, and it has gone very, very poorly.
So when you say put them in, let's talk about that a little bit. I think one of the things that I look at, and all I can speak on are the ones that I'm familiar with.
Sure.
I'm going to cheat. But anyway, I think Iraq, if we can talk about Iraq and Afghanistan, and then you talk about whichever one you think is the best to talk about on your side. But I'll go into a little bit from my standpoint on Iraq. I think we did it all. I think we had in our minds, and it ended up with the Arab Spring. I think we, in our minds, we're like, hey, everybody wants a democracy, and it doesn't work. I mean, it really doesn't. And so I think one of the things that we learned, and I hope we have learned in Iraq and Afghanistan, is it's much easier to overthrow a government than it is to manage it and allow it to grow on its own. And I think that's going to be the proof as we move forward with Venezuela, is how good is the State Department in doing that. I feel like we've already said, the CIA, the other intelligence organizations did a phenomenal job with this one. The Delta guys did a phenomenal job removing the power that be. How good are we going to do moving forward is the real question.
And I think honestly, with that, it's we just need to not get in our own way, because it feels different this time, because Venezuela has already been attempting democratic elections. They've already been asking for this, as opposed to us trying to install democracy, Iraq, Afghanistan, in these places where it's tribal, where that's just not going to work.
It doesn't work. And I'll give you an example, personal example from Afghanistan. One of the things, and we talked about this somewhat with immigration, and that is the federal government operates in numbers, like how many numbers we can get. And I remember when Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, all he wanted to do was stand up the Afghan National Army and Border Patrol and all these different things, and it was all numbers. The problem is there was no infrastructure. Afghanistan had no infrastructure. It still is. I mean, it is Stone Age meeting the Jetsons type of thing. I mean, it is Flintstones meeting the Jetsons, I think is the word that they use, the term. But like from my standpoint in Afghanistan, one of the problems is that we did it a lot of different ways. But one of the things that we did is we were like, okay, we can train these guys. So we trained them, right? From a support standpoint, we were like, okay, if we train these guys, we can send them out to this province that has they do not recognize the federal government in Kabul or whatever, however you want to say. I always say Kabul, but I'm sure I'm not saying it right. But anyway, they didn't recognize the federal government there. So they really didn't, like, they went ahead and did all the things that they did that never got support from the federal government or anything else. They lived in a tribal region. They knew who they liked. They knew who they disliked, which, I mean, I think it's a pretty good indication about a country when you have all these different languages in that same country that they still haven't figured it out. You have Pashtun, Dari, Arabic, all these different languages there, and they didn't, they hadn't figured it out. So for us, we arm these guys, we send them into their village, and they're going to be the representation of the federal government. The problem is that we've issued them a gun, we've provided them training, and we have their leader, who is the tribal chief or some entity out there. That's who the federal government, who the United States government, the federal government of Afghanistan says, okay, that's how we're going to pay them. The problem is they have no payroll system. So that person just gave it to people that he liked. So the average person, the average Joe soldier on the battlefield in Afghanistan is out there with a gun, no food, no support, and training that we gave him. Guess what he decided to do? He's like, you know what? If I set up a checkpoint on the side of the road, I can start charging my own toll. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, yes, the Taliban's not here anymore, but the services that we're supposed to get, we're not getting running water, we're not getting any of these other things. And on top of that, the people you are training are robbing us. And so it just doesn't work. It doesn't that. And so my hope in this one is we look at it and go, y'all have a better idea about what to do than we do. Let's let you go with it. And it's easy for us 2020, it's 2020 hindsight. That's what it is. Hindsight's 2020. You look at something and you're like, oh, that was a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea because it's easy to complain after it's over. And but I do think history is the best thing to learn from how to prevent mistakes. And I think one of the mistake we made in Afghanistan, and I think the mistake we made in Iraq, is that we thought that people would rally behind an idea of a democracy. And I think they did eventually. Initially, look at all the people that voted. I think about all the stamped thumbs and everything else that these people went in there to vote. And I think they really embraced it. And then they realized, like, our lives aren't any better. So then then that vacuum is filled. And I think for me, I think Iran is a very interesting thing right now. And I think Venezuela is a very interesting, and there are some very smart people working on it. I just hope that they are able to put a government together in Venezuela that is beneficial to the Venezuelan people.
And that's the aspect of it where I personally, I'll say I'm not holding my breath, is us going in and I'll let a little bias out real quick. I'm not holding my breath under this administration, because this needs to be for the Venezuelan people. It needs to be for the success and growth and economic stability of that country.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the feeling that we're still going to find a way to make sure America gets its cut, because from what I've seen, from what I've heard, Trump saying that the oil industry is going to go in, it's going to redo the infrastructure, and it's going to run their oil, essentially denationalizing their oil industry for at least the short term, if not the long. He's already said something today or yesterday, where something to the effect of, we're going to start exporting oil to America, to the U.S. On Air Force One yesterday, he gave an interview with Lindsey Graham to a bunch of reporters, and every single thing he said was oil, 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 to the point where Lindsey Graham even tried to pull him back, saying, oh, and narco terrorism, we're going to cut down on drugs, we're going to really try and put a kibosh to this, if I remember his comment right. And then right when he stops talking, Trump chimed back in and said, and we're going to get the oil. And so for me, what makes it difficult is, you're absolutely right that we do have the people. Again, credit to Delta and CIA for seemingly pulling off as near as can be flawless an operation.
Right.
Credit, and because that's, I jotted it down, that clearly, like, they've been working on this plan for a while. This doesn't just pop up overnight, which, to do my little 2 cents, also means Trump declaring fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction 2.5-3 weeks ago is, to me, a red flag of, he's creating an excuse for something they were already planning. Not saying that it isn't, not saying that many people have died, but it's terms like that to me wave the red flag of Iraq 2.0, oil, weapons of mass destruction, dictator, U.S. involvement, yada, yada, yada. But it's one where right now, like, my hope, the success for Venezuela, I feel, will come down to how much do we allow the Venezuelans to take lead, and how much do we try and put our influence in? Because while it is a good thing to get Russia and China out of our backyard, getting them out of our backyard by just taking other people's backyards is not the, for lack of a better term, American way of doing it. Like, we need to support them. We need to help them grow and help them rebuild. And then we need to step back. We need to make deals. Sure, it absolutely is beneficial to us to have a good connection for oil, for natural resources, for their mineral resources, but not to the point, or not to the extent of exploiting the country, but to prop them up and help them grow as well. Because a strong Western Hemisphere creates a problem for the Eastern Hemisphere. If we can back our people, back our neighbors,
right,
that's how you keep the other ones away.
So to go on that point, as far as working in our own backyard, and talking about history, what can you point at in the previous Trump administration and so far now that he has done where you felt like this? I understand what he says. He says a lot of stuff that, like, I'm like, I wish you wouldn't say that. But like, from my standpoint, what has he actually done? What policies has he had? Foreign policies has he had in his first administration and thus far in this administration that would show the kind of, I'll just call it cannibalism of another entity where we're going to take over something? What have you seen from the left side? What has he done? I understand people don't like the way he does stuff, but
Yeah.
like, historically speaking, you have 5 years now of leadership. What in that 5 years of leadership causes you pause on the left that he's going to do that based on what he has done thus far, just in foreign policy?
So I think what I think is really interesting about Trump when you look at his 2 terms is they are so distinctly different from each other, because I feel in his first term, he was still under the impression that he would run for 4, run again, get another 4, and that would be it. And with the break in the middle, I think that exacerbated some of his rhetoric, exacerbated some of his frustrations. And so in the first term, I remember he would bring people in to be his advisors and whatnot. And it seemed like in that first 100 or so days, that first year, he was firing one left and right until he got people he wanted. What he's done differently this time is from the jump, it feels like he's targeted, and you know, this is my left view of, feels like he's targeted people that are not necessarily the most qualified for the role, and therefore will be more likely to go with his plans because they know, you know, they're in a position outside of maybe they know they should be. But so he gets yes men.
Let's just pause it with that. Let's think about that. So we're saying that he's putting people in who aren't qualified. Let's just strictly take it from this standpoint. The Department of War is the one that executed this mission.
You mean the Department of Defense?
No, Department of War. They are the ones that put this mission together.
Correct.
Is that like what we're talking about is effectiveness? Is the Secretary of War beneficent as it relates to just this operation?
I do not feel that I have the
end results. The end results. We agree that this operation was a flawless operation.
Seemingly, yes.
The objective was to remove a leader and do it in a strategic way where we didn't lose our people, and we did that, and he did that. And I think people want to say, well, he's not qualified, but at the end of the day, he was given a mission and he executed it flawlessly. So that is, to me, that is an indication of effectiveness.
Sure. And I, as much as I want to, I won't hit the low-hanging fruit on that one and just say that I think time will tell who was or how this mission played out as we get more information, as details of it come out, and see.
What do you mean how this played out? So you got
like the coordinating of it, like where, to what degree was Secretary Hegseth involved? To what degree did we defer to our admirals and our generals for coordinating, CIA directors for coordinating? Essentially,
CIA directors in appointed position.
Yeah. But my point being, like, whose fingers were where in the execution.
Let me just interject on leadership. One of the things, people can piss and moan about Trump all you want, but like, look at who he's appointed and look at the effectiveness. People can disagree with, okay, well, I disagree with this policy, but from an effectiveness standpoint, he was given a mission. One of the things that's caused the most problem for the average soldier on the ground is leaders, policy leaders, appointed positions, Secretary of Defense back then, the president, all the people that are involved in the chain of command. I think one of the reasons why the Obama plan worked so well for Osama bin Laden is he said, this is what I want you to do. And he made the ultimate decision. So I think it's unfair to sit there and say, well, I wonder who planned it. Well, the fact is his entity was successful in what it did. His department was effective, and he was the leader of that department, so he's done a good job.
Yeah, I can, yeah, I won't argue that. Yeah,
And,
it went out without.
and we'll get into that one another day, but just I would, like, in light of when we're going over this, like the dudes in ICE and the officers that are involved in that, like I feel bad for that woman's family, but I also think that your side's got to tone down the rhetoric, because you don't you can't continue, they can't continue to put a target on people's back. But that's just a blurb.
Yeah.
Go back to what we were talking
for the most part, I try and stay true to the fact that at the end of the day, whether I agree with the policy or not, the Delta Force guys that went in, they were doing their job and they were doing it very well. And I can't, any feelings I have towards the execution or the legality or whatever side conversation, that's not on them. They executed their operation to the best of their abilities and nailed it. And credit where credit is due to them. And therefore up the chain, like it went off, it went smoothly as to be expected, or as it could be planned to, not without casualties on the other side, but yeah, credit there that it was executed well.
Well, I think let's talk about casualties. I think one of the things people complain about a lot is they're like, well, they were innocent. Have you heard anything on your side about innocent people? I'm not talking about like, hey, you're a bodyguard and you were trying.
No, the only people I've heard as a casualty as of yet, haven't heard anything about Venezuelan citizens or civilians. It sounds like it was 80 soldiers, 32 or so of which were this Cuban special forces group that had been brought in as like direct security, apparently not very good, but they were there. And then I guess that would be 48 Venezuelan soldiers. But to my understanding, there have been no secondary civilian casualties. Some U.S. guys got injured, but we lost no U.S. troops, which is good. So all in all, this was, from that viewpoint, a successful military operation in that it was only the combatants that were involved.
And I think that, again, it can't just stop with the Secretary of War, the Delta guys, but the agency did a hell of a job getting the information, putting those guys on target, and all the things that were involved with that. So, like, from my standpoint, I won't do a victory lap. We'll go to your next point, but like, from my standpoint, people can say, hey, they're not qualified, and they might. I think you can make the argument, well, there is a loyalty there that he hadn't had in past administrations. But again, look at what he was elected to do. Look at what he's done, and the people that he's put in charge as a result, from, like, I feel like you can clearly on the left say, I do not like the Secretary of War's policy as it relates to different things in the military. As far as transgender, all those different things. Like, I think 100% the left can say that, but you can't. I would struggle to say he's not qualified to do the job when he pulls off a mission like this. Time will tell. Yeah. It's one. What? He's batting 1,000 right now as it relates. Well, operationally, what other operations is it?
Well, I mean, you can't look past the whole signal gate thing of him releasing classified. Well, not classified because it was deemed not classified, but operational information in the midst of the strikes being pulled off. So,
okay, so you actually gave me one more, the strikes in Iran and all the stuff that's happened over there now. I would say, from an operational standpoint, he's 2 for 2. You can get in the weeds and say, well, he shouldn't have done this with signal. Sure. He shouldn't have done that. But as far as if we are evaluating people on performance of their duties, and performance of the duties for the Secretary of War is to take action militarily and be successful. And I think Venezuela was a success and Iran was a success. Yeah, I know people said a lot of different things and said, well, we weren't. I can't remember how it was said, but basically like, oh, well, you really didn't destroy the Iranian capabilities. But I mean, I have to say there seems to be some changes going on over there now, and I don't think it's because we were unsuccessful in what we did. Time will tell.
No, I mean the targets, from my understanding, the targets we were going for, whether we can go back and forth on how much nuclear material was still there when they were hit, but the targets that we went after were pretty well destroyed, pretty well knocked out of commission. So again, I would absolutely give you, Iran, Venezuela, those were two very successful operations.
So who else? See if you could find me one that you're like, okay, from the left standpoint, this is somebody that wasn't qualified. We dealt with the Secretary of War. Who's somebody else that you think was not qualified?
I
even let you pick. You don't have to say it right away, but I mean, that'll be a good discussion if you want to get into it.
I mean, I feel like that takes us off on a tangent away from Venezuela for another time. We'll come back to it, but I'll say RFK Jr., I think with HHS is a little out there for my liking in terms of his approach to things.
I think
we'll circle back to that one a different day.
I think what bothers you is he went from left field to right field, and you want him to stay towards center. But anyway, go to your next point.
Well, no. So when we sticking with Venezuela, so we've looked, historical context. The U.S. Really needs to nail this one because again, if I'm just off the top of not top of my head, but looking like 1953, 54, 64, 65, 73, 94, 2011 with Libya, like we've kind of dropped the ball a decent enough a number of times that making sure that these guys are okay and these guys are in a better spot. I think it has to be a priority now. It has to be, like, I know I'm on the side of let's not get involved in other people's issues, over the seas. We've been doing it for years, and it's kind of put our own country by the wayside a little bit from time to time. But I think with this one, with how it was executed, with the publicity of it, the just publicness of it, we gotta nail the recovery for them and for the Venezuelans. Like, we came in, turned their world upside down, and we gotta do right by them. And I think where my concern is, you asked earlier about policy specifically for like the US's benefit, which, not saying that there aren't conversations to be had. It's trade. We need things, we have things. It's a give and take situation. But one that jumped to mind for me when you asked earlier was our deals with Ukraine, which we can get into on a different one, how involved in Ukraine we should be. But in the midst of them trying to create this push, this front, can you get us help? Can you get us whatever? I felt that we sort of strong-armed them into agreeing to mineral deals because it was you either agree or you lose your country. We pull all of our support. To me, that seemed like a sort of taking advantage of the moment situation, which again, that's maybe, a soft heart or whatever. But you look at Venezuela, and again, it's to me, the oil thing is a big red flag of, did we do this for the people or did we do it for us? And it can be both, but it has to be an equitable both and not an exploitive both. So
I've got a question as it relates to that. I feel like you have what we've discussed on the left is kind of this thought of like helping your neighbor and things like that. And so my question as it relates to that is, from that standpoint, what does your side of it look like? Because I think we look at the equitable side of it, of like, okay, that wasn't a cheap operation that we performed to remove their president.
Correct.
So we have expended resources. So at what point, from your standpoint, is there like, okay, you have made restitution or at least righted the ship, and this is a equitable relationship on both sides moving forward? What does that look like on your side?
Beneficial deals. So like, obviously at the end of the day, like, it's going to come down to oil exports from them, imports for us, minerals, stuff like that.
Right.
And so in a way that, if they're selling oil to England at, $60 a barrel, they sell it to us at 55. Just something like those little bits where we're not exploiting them and just taking. They're still making, they're still growing their economy.
Okay.
Just giving us a little bit better of a cut, so to speak, or of a agreement. Or you look and you go, establishing them. I think a big one, if we truly want to say that the operation in Venezuela was for drugs and not oil, I think one of the biggest ways that they could help us is be the police force of the Central American area to fight the war on drugs for us in that area. I think that would be a huge.
So you're saying their country is responsible for interdicting drugs before they get to the U.S. Is that what you're saying?
I think that would be an amazing exchange if there was a way to pull that off. If there was an agreement that could come where they were catching the boats before they left, as they're leaving before it gets to us, or if they were influencing to the best of their abilities their neighbors to try and prevent the movement. I don't know if that's even feasibly possible. I don't know what the policy or the diplomacy on that would be, but I
think you're definitely onto something, because like from my standpoint, because I worked narcotics most of my career, and we always said we're successful if we interdict them before they ever get here. I mean, you can make buys, and take down people after they already have the product here, or you can take the people that are supplying them a county away, a state away, or even a country away, take them out where they're at. And I think it's a really good point. I think one of the biggest problems that we run into right now is our neighbor to the south, direct neighbor, is 100. I mean, there are a lot of problems in Mexico. I mean, that's the best way to put it. I mean, we can go into a lot of detail. That'll be a good discussion from another time. But I think it can be both, kind of what you were talking about. Instead of just the oil, you want to see more of the narco-terrorism and everything else. But again, I think all of it works together. I think this entity was funded by the oil, but also from the drugs and everything else. So it's not just it's a very complex situation, because they are bootlegging, for lack of a better way of saying it. They were bootlegging oil to China and to Russia and it is interesting. Someone put a story on there and they said, well, this is beneficial because 70% of the oil that China is getting is coming from either Iran and Venezuela. Well, that's not, and so if we shut those down, it'll cripple the Chinese government. Well, that's not the case. The case fine print is China is getting, like, some of their small oil refineries and companies are getting oil from the bootleg oil from Venezuela and Iran. So it's not that it sounds good, but it's not that big. Like, oh, if we take out 70%, we'll cripple China. Well, that's not it. There's a contribution there. It's just not the biggest story.
Well, and so also I'm gonna take just a real brief side thought experiment of, let's pretend we aren't Americans, right? So like right now, America faulted Venezuela a lot for supplying, the ghost fleet for the Russians, or the sanctioned oil getting out. We just caught a ship in the North Atlantic that the Coast Guard's been chasing for 2 weeks of an oil tanker. So we have sanctions. The U.S. has sanctions. We don't like Russia. We don't like China. We're trying to slow them down. That's America, USA. But now let's pretend for a second that you and I are Venezuelans. I'm the Venezuelan government. I still have to make money, and I'm having people offer to buy my goods. So to me, like, people bring up like, oh, they were supplying oil to Russia or China. Okay. They need to make money. They need to run their government. They need to fund stuff. I know for sure if someone tried to tell the U.S., don't sell your soybeans to China because we're embargoing them. If it's Venezuela or Argentina trying to tell the U.S., hey, don't sell soybeans to China because we're selling soybeans to China, we look at Argentina and go, screw you, we're doing what we want to do. And so there's a certain degree for me, when you look at these other countries, you can have the American opinion, but they're not Americans, they're Venezuelans. And how would we feel as Americans if we started being dictated what we could or couldn't do by another country? I look at it too in the sense of, and this is where like the thought experiment is let's say Russia or China or heck, NATO, or pick a country, thinks that Trump is being a bully and that Trump is being this huge problem in the Western Hemisphere. Oh, he just invaded Venezuela. Oh, he's killing whatever. and one of their black ops teams comes and snatches him out of the White House in the middle of the night. Obviously, that wouldn't happen. It's feasibly impossible. But the argument being, if we are able to sit and justify our actions, we have to understand that those same justifications are running through other people's heads too. You know as well as I do that somewhere in Russia there is a conversation being had of how could we take Trump? How could we take him out? How could we do whatever? And you like, I know it's a weird take, but it's that if we can accept that as Americans and our policy, then we have to understand that we aren't the only ones thinking that way. And how would we receive that same situation, God forbid it happened to us? And that perspective of, okay, so, and it's why I think it's so highly important to help rebuild Venezuela right now is they took a kick in the mouth, and now we have to help with the bandages. We have to help with the whatever, because we need that.
Did they really take a kick in the mouth, or did they?
Some. I mean, he had his supporters. He had people.
Well, he had the 30%. But again, if you're dealing with the democracy, and I think that's the difference, is that I'm not going to use the America First thing, but we are America. And if we want to look at it and go, okay, well, we made a mistake, we need to change our policy, I think that's one thing. But I think if you go into the history, I don't feel like as Americans and as a government, like there are people that take advantage of situations 100%. We talked about the 1% before. But the other thing is, I think the old expression is, America is great because it's good. And I think that's the difference is that I think you look at some of the policies and the things that have happened in some of the countries you listed, they're not doing good. And we can get better. But like from my standpoint, China, it hasn't been good. The stuff that they did with Taiwan, Hong Kong, and also in some of the other places, it's not been good.
And that's where I'll say, one of my concerns is this precedent. Like, what if China goes, oh, well, America intervened in Venezuela because we were there. We'll intervene in Taiwan because America's there. Like, it's those, like, there's the positive.
I think there
are potential negative outcomes.
Right. But I think the difference in that is I don't think that any of the policies that we have are destructive of another country based on what I know. So in other words, I feel like we have a lot of problems in this country internally, but I don't think any of the policies, no matter what president you've looked at or what entity you've looked at, there's going to be some selfishness and things like that. Again, with the 1%, but I think as far as a country, we are not trying to take other countries. China is actively trying to take other countries with Taiwan and things like that. Russia's doing the same thing with Ukraine, with Crimea, all those different places. So I think that's
let me ask you this, because that's interesting, because I've thought about this. Okay. And so obviously after World War II, imperialism was kind of shoo-shooed away. Colonies were given up. The sun set on the English Empire, all that type of stuff. Especially
the British
Empire, yes. And especially after the Cold War, when Russia or the USSR collapsed, like they gave up all their satellite states. But when I look at it, I feel like America did a very tricky maneuver to our benefit. I don't fault us for it at all. I think it was very tactically smart. But I'll ask you this, how many countries in the world does the US have an armed military base on? I don't know the exact answer. I know it's dozens.
It's a bunch.
How many foreign entities, how many foreign countries have a military base in the United States? 0.
Right. But that's because
so this is my point, is we have a imperialism by presence that we've established since World War II, which not necessarily is a bad thing.
I don't
because it's protectorate, but it's our influence is being present.
I don't agree with the imperialistic viewpoint, because I don't feel like we're annexing. We have a couple. I guess we can get to Greenland at some point.
I was about to say, what are your thoughts on Greenland?
But again, I think that's posturing. But from my standpoint, when you look at that, is most of those countries that we're in, I think about Korea and a couple of the other countries, are countries like Japan. We have signed on to protect them, and I think there's a lot of different things, but I look at it like this. If we use it as an example, nobody. So let's just take it from a standpoint of.
I also meant imperialism, not in a definitive stance, but just in a present.
So let's just talk about, like, from my standpoint, when I look at it, I think about the Secret Service is never going to say, hey, I want local departments to come in and help us with this protective detail. There are pieces that you can do, but as far as the core function of the Secret Service is going to, because they are the best of the best at protective work. There are other entities that can do it, but as far as they're concerned, they're the gold standard. So why would the gold standard ask a lesser to come and protect us? And I do think from a militarily, with what we have, we are probably one of the strongest countries militarily. I think we've got
technologically,
and in a lot of ways, there are things that we can get better at, and I think that's one of the things that I really like about the new Secretary of War is the antiquated systems that we had to fulfill contracts was just benefiting the 1% of corporations that got smaller and smaller, the contracted corporations. And so from my standpoint, the difference in us and other countries, the reason we don't have people here is we don't ask for that help. Most of those countries have either asked for that help. I think about Pakistan because you can say, well, no, they don't ask for it. But yes, they really do, because Pakistan didn't, they have to talk out of both sides of their mouths. They've got the far groups of people that, like, no, we don't need America. We hate America. So you have leadership going, America sucks and everything else, but they're like, hey, we really like you to stick around because we need your help. So,
and that's what comes with being the biggest, baddest in the neighborhood is, yeah, you're going to piss off a bunch of people. But there's also a value to be had by having you on. It's the running joke of you always give the candy bar to the weird guy at work because you want him on your side if something goes wrong. Right. Always as the liberal, always make friends with the people that have all the guns because in a pinch I know where to go. Right. But it's that aspect. So I think you're spot on that it is a relationship more than a exploitation by any means. And you do look at places that like Pakistan where they know the use of America, but they also know that they have to play nice with their neighbors, essentially. And I think that's why when we look at, going back to the Osama bin Laden thing, it's why we didn't just blitz Pakistan. We talked to them and we said, hey, this is happening. I think there was some communication at some point, but we didn't give them a heads up we were going in. But
we communicated with them, and I don't have any inside story, but I would say there was somebody that knew that we were coming, but it wasn't somebody at the very top because of the possibility. I mean, he was a welcome guest there. So
yes, but my point being that it's that conversation. It's that they know we don't take it personally when they don't say nice things about us because we know that it's their obligation in that area.
Yeah, to take that stand. Is there anything else you want to cover before we cut it? Because we've hit our time limit.
No, but I will give you one thing to think about for next time when you're talking about your contracts. Go look up the $8.6 billion Boeing contract for 25 to 50 F-15IAs for Israel and look up how it was funded, because it's the most roundabout, weird way that ends up costing the U.S. taxpayer in this back-channel-y whatever. It's very interesting. I'd love to get your thought on it.
All right. Sounds good, buddy. Well, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on. Look forward to having more conversations.
Yeah, man.
And take care.